So his first recording has a funny, what is supposed to be his first, has a sort of funny title, a long title. It's a sort of funny vocal comedy. It's done by a guy who isn't that well known as a jazz performer. I forget who it is now.
Let me be your memory for a second. It's called Bring Enough Clothes for 3 Days.
That's it.
And it's by Timmy Rogers.
That's it, Timmy
Rogers.
Rogers.
It's the note you got from the draft board.
I should have remembered because I actually saw Timmy Rogers.
Yeah.
He was a very funny guy. But, his actual first recording date, which I found, not by accident more or less, is an unissued Slim Gaillard session with Ben Webster, which obviously Ben would have brought Jimmy along to that. And when I told Jimmy that that was his first recording, he absolutely disremembered and he disagreed. And I didn't want to argue with him too much because
it wasn't issued at the time.
It wasn't issued at the time. I told him that. And I was willing to, I wanted to make copy for him because I was happy when I discovered that, and I don't know who put it out. It's some obscure.
It was a Jerry Valberg.
Yeah, it was Jerry, yeah. And it's good.
Yeah,
there was no reason not to issue it except that I think Slim's contract ran out and they didn't bother to put it out. Incidentally, Slim Gaillard wrote one of my favorite love songs.
Serenade to a Poodle?
No. When banana skins are falling, that's when I'll come sliding back to you.
Okay.
What could be more romantic than that? I think we talked about
it. Yeah, we did talk about it.
So more about Jimmy.
Yeah.
Jimmy did me the favor, and it was agreed to by Stan Getz's wife, who was not always that easy to get to agree to things, that I should do the notes for Stan Getz's tribute to Jimmy.
The Peacocks.
Yeah. So I was at that session and got some insight into how good he was in a situation like that. Stan was we've talked about Stan, haven't we? But he was not the easiest guy, but he obviously had a very good rapport with Jimmy, and there was Elvin Jones too. So that was a really interesting insight into. Jimmy was a master musician, and that his skills as an accompanist. Beautiful composition, Peacocks, was actually done for a flautist. It was written for a classical flautist who was a friend of his. And I got to know him. He had this relationship with Carol Sloan, which was musically very creative. I went to see them once in a very brief period I had when I came back to the New York Post, where I had worked ages before, when Dick Sudhalter, who was doing their jazz reviews, was incapacitated and asked me to cover for him. And what I wanted to do was Carol and Jimmy, and I got to the club and it was canceled. So then I made a boo-boo, which I should have known better having been an editor myself. I didn't call the guy. It was night, and it was due the next morning. But I didn't have the shekel to go see somebody else and write that instead. I mean, which would have been perfectly all right. And that was like, he actually fired me. I mean, he couldn't fire me. I was only subbing. So that was Jimmy and Carol. I guess they must have had a little something. First time I saw Jimmy live was a wonderful event that was engineered by Charlie Bourgeois, who was George Weah's right hand. And by the way, while we're at it, I saw much to my pleasure that George is playing piano again. Wow. He played at Newport this year. And it was so sad that George decided that he couldn't play anymore because he said to me, I can't hear myself. So something must have happened with his hearing so that he's playing
Oh,
again,
good.
and that's great. But anyway, this was something that was engineered by Charlie Bourgeois. And it was a tribute to Johnny Mercer, which had Johnny performing as a singer. And it was at Town Hall. And I forget what else there was on stage in terms of musicians. It was just a rhythm section, but it was Jimmy, you know. And it was Mercer talked and sang. And it was just, I reviewed it ages ago, so that's sitting somewhere. But it was just a unforgettable evening, and Jimmy was so wonderful, and that was the first time that I'd actually seen him, because he spent so much time in California. He was finally moved to New York. I got to see him at the whatchamacallit, the Cookery. I got to see him at the Cookery, which was okay. I think I also got to see him at the other piano place in the village.
Bradley's.
Bradley's. And I fell in love with him, you know. I mean, he was just... And I've tried since then to find almost every recording that was on for quite a bit, and they're Californian things, which are not that remarkable in and of themselves, but every time he comes to bat, he says something, you know, he hits one out. I did interview with him in that series that was funded by the National Endowment for the Arts, which became known as the $2,000 interviews. NEA, I was on the jazz panel then, and it was really Martin Williams and Milt Hinton and I who decided that there should be something that would give older musicians a chance to get one of these $2,000 grants, which we were giving to younger musicians to study with somebody like Ron Carter or whatever. And that was when we decided that a career interview, a history interview of a certain length, you know, should be something that older musicians should have a chance to do, and it would pay the same amount as a stipend, which is $2,000. So once this became known, it was not difficult to persuade almost anyone to do an interview like that. You know. So I did with Jimmy, who didn't particularly cherish being interviewed, and at the time he was living at a pretty well-known by musicians hotel. I think it was called the Prince of Wales, which was on the east side, a small hotel, which was very inexpensive but nice. I mean, it was clean and nice. They had a small room, and that's where we did it. And
Not the Prince George.
Maybe maybe it was the Prince George.
Okay.
Something with royalty. So anyway, we did this interview, and it exists. I mean, all these interviews are available at the Institute of Jazz Studies. They can be listened to, and they're on an archival quality CD. We did get them transferred from the tapes, which are hard to deal with, and they're also transcribed. The transcripts are not 100% original,
of course,
authentic. You know, they're mistakes, mishearings, sometimes very funny ones. Names get savaged. Even place names. But anyway, Jimmy was not an easy interview. He was not feeling particularly well then. I think we did 2 sessions, in both of which he was lying in bed and I was sitting at his bedside. But he had some interesting things to say. He was very bright. And did I say this already? He was, you know, he was like a compendium of tunes.
You did. Where I want to bring something else in is he was also one of the finest singers I've ever heard.
Oh, loved his singing, and his last recordings, which fortunately I believe they were produced by Herbie Mann for Herbie's label, then short-lived label. He sings, and
it's so touching.
Yeah. But his time, that's part of what makes his singing so good. His time is so great, and he's one of those people who can play very slowly, or sing very slowly, and yet make it rhythmically alive, you know. His phrasing is beautiful. He wrote some tunes, not a lot, but he wrote some. And altogether, I mean, I'm very, very happy that I managed to really discover him and get to know him the last chance almost,
Yeah.
you know, during that last part of his life when he was in New York.
Yeah. And Norman Granz loved him.
Yes.
So there are those wonderful sessions with Zoot.
There's the great sessions with Zoot, not only for Pablo as well as Verve. And on Verve, I found something that is almost unknown. It's Jimmy with Bob Brookmeyer, their quartet sessions.
Yeah.
Whatever Jimmy is on turns out to be a gem, because he's one, no matter who is in charge nominally, I think it's Jimmy who eventually is the one who decides on the tempo.
Yeah.
And he was a tempo king. That's what made him so good with singers too. Tempos, keys, for horn players as well as for singers, he was an ideal guy. You know.
And without showing off in some way, when he sits down to play a melody at the piano, the voicings underneath the melody are always inimitable.
Yeah, yeah. And as I said, he knew all these thousands of tunes, including some really beautiful ones that nobody seems to know. I mean, there is in this huge output of what was once, you know, by jazz critics called Tin Pan Alley tunes, you know, well, it's now called Great American Songbook. There are hundreds of gems buried there. Jimmy knew those, you know.
Yeah. Part of the Billie Holiday rehearsal is that he's introducing Billie to Restless and a song called I'm Walking Through Heaven With You from the Lunsford repertoire.
Yeah.
So, a great artist.
Yeah. You know, it's, but we're talking about this is off Jimmy for a moment.
Sure.
But there is a bunch of live recordings by a wonderful Bobby Hackett, Vic Dickinson quintet, and on that Bobby plays a ballad feature of a tune that I only heard once before, and where did I hear it? On a Thelonious Monk record.
There's Danger in Your Eyes,
Yeah,
Cherie.
there's Danger in Your Eyes, Cherie. Which incidentally, if anybody gets a hold of it, the way Bobby plays that will literally make you cry. I mean, it's a beautiful tune, and he plays it so beautifully. Live, I mean, in front of a bunch of drinkers, you know, whatever. He just puts you in another realm. And he and Monk are the only ones who, jazz people who recorded this too. You wouldn't think of Bobby and Monk, but I would have liked to have heard them together.
Yeah.
And Monk, incidentally, I think Jimmy was very much aware of Monk, you know. But that Ellington record, which is a solo record, it's not a rhythm section, it's Jimmy alone. It's a beauty. He manages to find new ways of doing Take the A Train and so on, while always retaining the essence of the composition. He doesn't, you know, go out into space. And the sound he got from the piano, even some bad ones I've heard him live in clubs, you know, where you can make a bad piano song.